Things that have been happening, which I will do, and then my kids will probably do whatever they want to do while I'm trying to do that. So, one cool thing from Minneapolis, obviously I know you guys have gone through some trauma here with the whole George Floyd component, and how that's rocked the whole nation. Obviously the last major civil unrest would have been Ferguson, Missouri. And I remember I've got a dear friend that lives in Ferguson and is giving his life to what the Lord wants to do with civil righteousness in that whole category. And so he actually moved his family to Ferguson. There's some beautiful stories there. So when George Floyd happened, and I remember I watched it virally, I think the day before it went national. And I'm sitting there like, oh my gosh, here's Ferguson 2.0. It's just a thought I had. I'm paying my home right now. So I was on a ladder watching it and like, oh my Lord. And I felt impressed to come up here, but I didn't have the timing. One down, there we go. I'm surprised we still have three. And I told my wife, I was like, honey, I feel like I'm supposed to go to Minneapolis and or St. Louis, where Ferguson is at, and just participate in what does it look to respond in this hour, which I didn't have an answer. I think a lot of us, that was the question. What are we supposed to do? What should we do? What does the Bible say? And so about 5 or 6 days later, I was cutting my grass, very profound, and the Lord said, go. So I ended up going into the home, and I said, honey, I think I'm supposed to go to St. Louis, and I feel like I'm supposed to stand in the gap in whatever way and serve. And so she felt the yes, which was really incredible, because those are, it's a pretty intense place to go, into that kind of space right now where all the trauma and the pain is, the hurt. So we went to St. Louis, to the hot zone, right there in Ferguson, right next to the police station, where they would have been picketing for Michael Brown, so kind of the hot spot in St. Louis. And my dear friend JT was out there, and we were doing a prayer siege. We were doing a prayer siege in the Supreme Court there in Missouri. What's unique about that particular Supreme Court is that's where they made the case on, oh my gosh, I'm going to miss his name. The case where basically, Dred Scott, where they likened Dred Scott to an animal, not a human. And the Supreme Court justice that actually made that decree, that made the Dred Scott case, which was one of the most infamous, besides like a Roe v. Wade, terrible Supreme Court decision, he even said, as Missouri, we're proud of this decision and we'll pay for it in blood. Isn't that a weird thing for a Supreme Court justice to say? So it's just this really heavy thing about St. Louis and racism. So we went there, we worshiped underneath the arch, it was really powerful. Well, I wake up the next morning and my buddy JT goes, we're going to Minneapolis, we're going to Ground Zero. There's a church on the corner where George Floyd died, opposite Cup Foods, and we're going to preach the gospel. Let's go. And I'm like, well, called Tiff. I'm like, all right, honey, I feel this from the Lord. Are you sitting down? I feel like we're going to go right to the hot seat. And she loved it, and she felt it was from the Lord, so we ended up going. And all to say, the pastor there, it's an African-American church, and we had a team of about 30 of us collide in from LA, Kona, Hawaii, Kansas City, St. Louis, and a gentleman who was sort of like the local gangster had gotten saved. This guy's been shot 7 times and recently had his finger blown off, his 8th time. He shows up when we go to Ground Zero and he goes, I feel like I'm supposed to be here to help you guys. And we're like, well, I don't know that we need security. That's one way you could have helped us, but I think we're good. And when we tell him what we want to do, we want to preach the gospel, it's very loud. If you guys have been to Ground Zero, there's kind of a bunch of ideological camps. There's literally a club scene. There was like the African original from Africa movement, and they're screaming, and just a whole bunch of different like camps are being drawn. And when he hears we want to preach the gospel, he goes, well, would it help if there was no noise? We're like, well, yeah, how in the world are we going to pull that off? He goes, watch this. So, and I videotape this. We go from camp to camp to camp. There's about 5 different camps, if you'll call them that. And the guy walks up to the leader of each camp and goes, hey, this is my friend. They love Jesus. They're preaching the gospel at 5 o'clock. You need to shut all your sound down. He didn't like ask them nicely. He just commanded it. And because he's what his reputation is in that area, they were all like, yes, sir'd him. Like some pretty rough looking people. They all like really were almost terrified of the guy. So the Lord sent us this guy. So 5 o'clock hits. The whole place goes silent. There's probably about 3,000 people there going all different directions. Noises in every way. I mean, it's just chaos. And the whole place goes silent. And we get about 300 people doing a prayer siege around the memorial. For 1 hour, it's totally silent. It was kind of almost creepy, but incredible. Because it went from so loud. It's like a whole carnival going from screaming to silent. but the people didn't leave. And so we pray our siege. At this point, Fox News is there, CBS, 60 Minutes. Of all the days they picked to be here, it's this day. So because of that, the national narrative that they're getting is a Jesus one, not just only a racial, only one, which is really cool because we care what Jesus thinks because he's the one that's going to solve the problem, not just legislation. No, that can help, but we need Jesus really to reform things in our hearts. And so it's really this unique time where we have a national narrative, we have the local guys, and then we have like boots on the ground who've been living these street corners their whole lives. And they shut all the sound down, we do the hour, and then we preach the gospel. And we did it through worship. We had a gentleman get up and kind of empathize, but in a really godly way with what happened. Not just in sort of a lame way, but a very bold kind of empathization of the crying out of just even that particular representation of that street corner and what that means for a lot of individuals. And it was really powerful. And then in the end, we really preached the full, bold gospel. And several people get saved. And it was a tough crowd. I mean, we were not preaching in this church. This wasn't preaching in a charismatic, kind of just here at filled stadium where everybody's either getting re-saved or maybe they just had a tough week and they need to get saved again. Like this was the crowd that we really want to preach in front of. These are unsaved, first time, probably even offended with Jesus, mad at a lot of people type crowd. So initially we're kind of like, Lord, I just need you faithful to this. They wildly responded. They engaged in worship. They got saved. We saw healings. And right when it stopped, what was very interesting, a kid ODs just across the street corner. So you see this kind of rampant running all to this corner, which was really weird. And we get there and the kid OD'd. And they start calling the cops in, the ambulances in, and we end up praying for him. And I'm not going to say how it did or didn't happen, but I can tell you the kid was on his way to dying. We prayed. They also did give him some medicine that helps. But from what the paramedics said, the medicine wasn't counteracting fully the OD, the overdose. And he came back fully. So then we took that as a moment to then preach and really just talk about the power of Jesus. And then it started like flowing down rain. It was just this really sweet moment where it kind of like the heavens just broke open. And it was supposed to rain all day and the weather would held. And it was really supposed to rain a lot. And as soon as we got done, as soon as that kid came back, it just starts pouring. And what's cool is all the ministry had happened. People have been saved. There have been healings. And so I think one thing I just watched was I think this is really an hour for the church to say like, our Lord needs to run the narrative here. This isn't Fox News or CNN or MSNBC or none of them have the real narrative. There's only one man that has the narrative. And there's actually only one man's blood that's only been unjustly spilled, and it's Jesus's. And so I think there's this beautiful thing in America. And what the sense we've been feeling is, as churches have been kind of top-sided with not being able to conveniently meet, obviously they're kind of coming back together, but many churches are having to restructure everything. So the church has been, let's say, just kind of tipped upside down, metaphorically speaking, maybe a bit literally speaking. And then the Lord allows maybe the largest civil unrest we've seen since maybe Martin Luther, wild amounts of civil unrest. And I just can't but think of the moment where Joshua is given command over the entire body of Israel, cross into Jordan. It's like milk and honey time, right? I think they're like, we're going to march one day and we're going to be in Jerusalem after 40 years. Well, they don't. And not only do they not, God asks them to circumcise all the men right there. So, hey, milk and honey, hey, men, we're going to have to circumcise all you guys. And then after he does that, he asks them to walk around what would be their biggest fight. Jericho would be the largest stronghold they would take on their way to Jerusalem. And they had to walk around it 7 times for 7 days. Now, for us men, who maybe back then they didn't have certain ointment, who would want to walk out that prophetic act after being circumcised? It's kind of almost funny, to be honest. I don't know if they thought it was funny, but we can laugh now. And I just have seen this narrative with Jesus. He will tip upside down our convenient systems. Then he'll release some maybe level of unrest or an opportunity for us to step into his power and not ours. And so I really think God is using the brokenness of this world and the pain of choices that have been made to really be the seedbed for an awakening in our nation. And with some of you guys that have come and know what we do with All America, we're believing for God to raise up an awakening in our nation and really in our generation that's gone an unchurched route. It's largely unengaged. That something would wake up as they're crying out for justice, because my generation loves justice. They're just in the wrong type of justice. And so we're believing through all this pain and agony, if the church will rise up and declare the word of the Lord, I think people will really come. So we just wanted to say that's what we've been seeing. And in the midst of all the narratives, all the ideological camps, all the division, I just feel like that's exactly when Jesus' body shows up. Because there's never been an hour that people want to know what to do and what to believe. And so I want to just say it lightly, we know people are really hurting. We know it's a tough time for a lot of people. But in the midst of that, we can't but be stirred with faith. It's been almost like, sometimes we almost have to I don't know that in my 34 years of ministry have I ever seen hunger in our nation like we see it right now. I mean, being able to preach the gospel in first world America, in first world suburbs, and people are responding, that just hasn't happened. We've just been too busy for the gospel. So we feel really encouraged, and we're just seeing real hunger. And that's maybe the most exciting thing for a missionary. I think we're about to go open season for people's hearts. So again, we just hope you guys feel really encouraged, and that you guys find a way that y'all can engage. And I believe that you guys are going to see people hungry for the gospel, maybe in an unprecedented way that you guys have never seen in your whole life. And just to challenge you guys, I know often in our grocery stores or our video, well, we don't even have video stores, Blockbuster couldn't cut it. So our grocery stores and all the other stores, the stores that we go to and run errands, I just want to encourage you, if you've been jaded sharing the gospel because people don't want to hear it, I just want to encourage you, keep on doing it. Keep on finding little ways to share the gospel, little ways to relate, because hurting people really want a chance to talk about why they're hurting, and we have the best solution for them, no matter why. In fact, I'm not even worried about the reason why they're hurting, because I know it's still Jesus at the end of the day, whatever the problem is. So just want to encourage you guys with that. And we love you, and it's such an honor to be with you guys. It's always a blast to be up here. Can you want to say anything?
Love you guys. I think they heard me, but love you guys so much. Yeah.
Perfect. And the kids all stayed up here. I mean, that's a miracle. Good job. Yeah.